This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Tuesday, August 25th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees, so our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. Mali remains without a blueprint forward on Tuesday after 3 days of talks between military coup leaders and West African mediators yielded no decision on the makeup of a transitional government. The leader of the West Africa's regional bloc, former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, says they were permitted to speak with deposed President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita, who has been held by the junta since he resigned last week. Jonathan says Keita told him he was not forced from office and does not want to return to office, but wants a speedy return to a democratically elected government. Jonathan also says the Economic Community of West African States delegation and the junta, known as National Committee for the Salvation of the People, agreed on a number of issues, and they asked the military officers to look over some of the issues they did not agree on. Junta spokesman Major Colonel Ismail Wagi says ECOWAS leaders gave their view on the makeup of a transition government, but he says the final architecture of the transition will be decided by Malians. Before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, Zimbabwe's economy was in shambles, and many citizens were already struggling to survive. As food insecurity has grown, charities in the capital have opened relief kitchens to provide free meals to thousands, most of them informal traders unable to earn income because of coronavirus restrictions. Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare.
This poor suburb of Seke, about 30 minutes southeast of Harare, has one of the highest number of cases of food insecurity, according to official statistics of people affected by the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. After being unable to return to South Africa, where she's based when the lockdown started, this 35-year-old woman felt the hunger situation. She is now running a relief kitchen that daily provides 2 meals to those unable to feed themselves in the neighborhood which she grew up in.
I just want people to go to bed with a satiated tummy. That's all I want. I want, with the forecast in the future, I want people to gain self-sustenance. I want a population that says, in the event of a contagion or disaster, we can be able to pick ourselves up.
She started the project with her own food, then well-wishers chipped in and now feeds about 3,000 daily. After the lockdown, she wants to train people to start income-generating projects. One of the beneficiaries is this 53-year-old and informal trader. He walks daily more than 30 minutes twice a day to get food to look after his 3 kids. He says he has been expecting government's assistance.
What we actually saw was, the activities, especially of the police, trying to stop us to go anywhere far from our homes and to stop us actually to do our trade as usual, and we had to comply. But by complying, actually, we're actually doing bad for our families because it's like they're being depleted in terms of their provisions.
President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government says it is aware that informal traders who constitute the bulk of Zimbabwe's employment are being affected by the lockdown, which was imposed late March to contain the coronavirus pandemic.
We are not short of money in terms of the support to the vulnerable Zimbabweans. In fact, at the moment, we are waiting to reach our target of 1 million people who are vulnerable, who need to be registered, and we are appealing people to come forward and register with social welfare because we have the budget.
Some of those benefiting from the $3 a month government grant are depending on Samantha's relief kitchen. They say the grant cannot even buy enough cornmeal to make Zimbabwe's staple food, a thick porridge known as sadza or isitshwala, which is served with a relish. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare.
The COVID-19 pandemic is evolving differently in many countries. Let's find out how Zambia is responding to a surge in cases of the coronavirus. Suwilanji Siame has this report.
On the 18th of March 2020, Zambia recorded its first case of COVID-19. To contain the spread of the virus, the government closed schools, bars, casinos, nightclubs, and cinemas. Over time, however, the surge in infection cases rose to its highest levels. Currently, Zambia is ranked the third country with the highest number of COVID-19 cases in the SADC region. The Zambia Public Health Institute is at the forefront in the fight against the pandemic.
In the recent past, unfortunately, things haven't been well. We have seen a major rise in the positivity, what we're picking almost the 22%. We are seeing a lot of very sick people managing in our hospitals, and we have seen an increase in the number of people dying in the community.
Since the pandemic first surfaced, the Ministry of Health has been holding daily televised updates. The update held on the 19th of August 2020 announced a record number of cases.
Today, Zambia recorded 237 new cases out of 845 tests done, bringing the total number of cases to well over 10,000, therefore standing at 10,218. Again, the spot map does show wide geographic spread, and we continue to see cases in different parts of the country.
When the pandemic first broke out in March, people were complying to measures put in place by government to fight the spread of the virus. However, as time passed, people adopted a lax attitude towards the pandemic. This prompted the relevant authorities to step up efforts to enforce the COVID-19 guidelines.
We work with Zambia police just to enforce. In some cases, you find that people are opening bars. I'm sure everybody is aware that in Zambia, there's a presidential directive that bars and nightclubs will remain closed until the situation improves.
To increase the level of compliance to COVID guidelines, police in Lusaka introduced a surcharge, fine or penalty, of 750 kwacha, about $40 on individuals found not wearing masks in public, a move that didn't go well with some members of the public.
750 fine is somewhat a bit too extreme in my own analysis. I do believe the advocacy that has been prevailing is efficient.
Following complaints from the public and cries from various sectors of society questioning the legality of the fines, Home Affairs Minister Stephen Kampiongo announced a ban on police officers collecting fines from individuals not wearing masks.
Officers are hereby restrained from arresting and charging fines to members of the public not wearing masks, but instead they should be able to warn and sensitize violators to minimize the risk of the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic.
However, overzealous police officers like the one seen in this video have been seen punishing people not wearing masks by asking them to do frog jumps. As the cases continue to rise, it is expected that government will continue to announce measures that are within the confines of the law to mitigate the spread of the virus. Suwilanji Siame for VOA News, Lusaka.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visits Sudan on Tuesday as the White House pushes for Arab nations to normalize ties with Israel. Pompeo's schedule includes meetings with the Sudanese Prime Minister Abdel Hamdok and Sovereign Council Chair General Abdel Fattah el-Burhan. In addition to Sudan-Israel relations, the State Department says Pompeo will also discuss continued U.S. support for the civilian-led transitional government in Sudan. Hamdok became prime minister 1 year ago after the military ousted President Omar al-Bashir following months of mounting protests against his 30-year rule. The World Health Organization says African region on Tuesday is expected to be officially certified free of wild polio virus. This certification comes 4 years after Nigeria, the last polio endemic country in Africa, recorded its final case of wild polio. The certification marks a major step toward global eradication of the virus. In an interview with Africa 54's health correspondent Lino Mudu, Michelle Zafran, the WHO Director for Polio Eradication, discusses efforts and strategies that led to this achievement in Africa and what is being done to help Afghanistan and Pakistan, the two remaining polio endemic countries, achieve the same milestone.
This is an extraordinary achievement, and it shows what nations and countries can do when they work together and when sort of hundreds of thousands of frontline workers dedicate their time to this. Back in 1996, when Nelson Mandela launched at the meeting of the Africa Union the effort to kick polio out of Africa, there were 75,000 children that were paralyzed by polio every year on the African continent. And, and we've reached a stage where we can declare Africa free of the wild polio virus. The last case of wild polio virus was on 21 August of 2016, and we're basically 4 years past that date. We normally ask for 3 years without a detection to actually consider whether we can certify a country or region polio-free. So after 3 years, the African Regional Certification Commission has started to look very carefully at the information, at the data of all countries in the African region. And then recently, they've looked more carefully at the remaining countries, including Nigeria. And now they are in a position to certify, indeed, based on very good quality surveillance, and confirmation that we have access to the children in all areas.
How do we maintain this gain?
What is critically important is, of course, to vaccinate every single child and strengthen the routine immunization program in all countries in Africa. The problem also is that while we don't detect the wild poliovirus in Africa, the wild poliovirus continues to circulate in Pakistan and Afghanistan. With the current rhythm of international travel, no country in Africa is safe from importation of the wild poliovirus from Pakistan or Afghanistan. So we need to maintain very high levels of population immunity using the good vaccines that are safe that we have available. And too many countries in Africa have not so good routine immunization coverage, and they need to strengthen their routine immunization, their essential immunization program, to make sure that no child ever gets paralyzed by polio.
So now Africa is declared polio-free. Nigeria is no longer a polio-endemic country. What happens now with Afghanistan and Pakistan, the two remaining polio-endemic countries? What is the strategy by WHO to ensure that they also reach the milestone to be declared polio-free?
So WHO, together with all of the global polio eradication initiative partners, which includes Rotary International, of course, as an important partner, UNICEF, Center for Disease Control of the United States, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is working very hard to support the government of Pakistan and Afghanistan to implement the strategies that have worked everywhere else in the world. Again, here we have had some setbacks in the past couple of years with anti-vaccination rumors that have led to a spread of the virus. Of course, the current situation with the pandemic of COVID-19 has put a hold on some of the activities that we're carrying out in these countries. And so the virus has had time to gain some ground and circulate more. We've resumed activities now. We are focusing on identifying the very local, specific issues that have led parents to not bring their children to vaccination, or for us, have led us or the program to miss a large number of children, allowing the virus to circulate. So there's a lot of communication, better understanding also how some of the communities are mobile and how do they move and how do they operate, ensure that we're going to provide them with an access to vaccination. We also intend to better serve the communities where the virus continues to circulate by providing them services that go beyond just the polio vaccination. We're trying to integrate with other vaccination for vaccine-preventable diseases and sort of see how we can join forces with other actors to provide access to safe water, to a package of basic health services, so that the communities see that we don't only provide polio drops, which of course protects them against polio, but for them, polio may not be such an issue when they're suffering from measles or other vaccine-preventable diseases. So we want to ensure that we sort of come with a broader range of services that these communities really demand and need, so that we can tackle the polio problem once and for all.
Michel Zafran, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu speaking with Michel Zafran, the WHO Director for Polio Eradication. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover during the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a Somali-American is named Teacher of the Year in the U.S. state of Minnesota. We'll be right back.
Being part of Our Voices is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
Presidential nominating conventions do not date all the way back to the early days of the United States. Back then, political parties held caucuses where small groups of party leaders chose candidates. It wasn't until the 12th presidential election in 1832 that parties held conventions to select their candidates. There were occasional surprises over the candidates selected at conventions. Some conventions took a long time to name a nominee. In 1924, the Democrats spent 16 days to take 109 votes to nominate John Davis, who wound up losing the election to Republican Calvin Coolidge. Modern conventions move quicker than that. Most of the delegates are awarded to candidates through state caucuses or primaries, and the nominee is known before the convention begins. Conventions still deliver an occasional surprise. Nominees often name their pick for vice president at a convention. Because they are televised, they attract the attention of voters trying to decide how to vote in November. The COVID pandemic has forced both parties to change plans for 2020, relying more on virtual settings without large crowds of faithful party in attendance.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Republicans opened their 4-day convention in Charlotte, North Carolina Monday and unanimously nominated U.S. President Donald Trump for a second term. As VOA's Michael Sullivan reports, in a nation burdened by COVID-19 and a recession, speakers warned of darker days ahead if Democratic Party nominee Joe Biden is elected president.
In Charlotte, a scaled-down convention, partly live and partly pre-recorded, with Republican delegates from around the United States all backing Trump.
So the biggest little delegation of the state of Rhode Island proudly stands united to cast our 19 votes for President Donald J. Trump.
That evening, when the focus shifted from Charlotte to Washington, speaker after speaker defended Trump's handling of the pandemic and economy. As at the Democratic convention, African Americans and Hispanics held prominent roles, including Nikki Haley, an Indian American and former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations.
The black small business owners who've watched their life's work go up in flames, they matter. The black kids who've been gunned down on the playground, their lives matter too.
Trump was shown at the White House meeting frontline workers who are fighting the pandemic and, citing his accomplishments, recalled his appointment of conservative federal judges, something he said his Democratic challenger, Joe Biden, would not do.
The radical left will demand that he appoints super radical left, wild, crazy justices going into the Supreme Court. Your American dream will be dead if that happens.
Democrats accuse Trump of trying to slow the mail during the pandemic to favor his re-election by suppressing the vote of those likely to back Biden. Trump said Democrats are promoting a vote-by-mail scheme that could expose the election to fraud.
This is the greatest scam in the history of politics, I think, and I'm talking about beyond our nation. And they act like they're aggrieved.
It's a claim ridiculed by Democrats. Viewers were reminded of national protests by the Black Lives Matter movement, hearing from a St. Louis couple who brandished weapons when they felt threatened by protesters.
They're not satisfied with spreading the chaos and violence into our communities. They want to abolish the suburbs altogether.
Trump is trailing in most polls, but the election will depend on who gets out the vote in key swing states like Michigan.
I expect him to have more votes in Michigan than he did last time, and the energy policies and the manufacturing policies, the new trade agreement, all those things are of massive benefit to Michigan and to the upper Midwest as well.
Republicans have 3 more nights to try to shape the narrative before the election campaign gets underway in earnest. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
As Republicans encourage Americans to vote for President Donald Trump, they are making their case this week from Charlotte, North Carolina, where the pandemic has forced them to dramatically scale back their national convention. Even though the pandemic has shaken American businesses, there are many who say they still have faith in the president's ability to bring economic prosperity back. Isha Sarai has the story from Charlotte.
Throughout the coronavirus pandemic and his campaign for re-election, President Trump has focused his promises on reviving the economy while denouncing his Democratic rival Joe Biden's economic approach.
Biden the other day said, no, he'd shut it down. He'd listen to some guy say, and he'd shut it down. We just broke a record on jobs, an all-time record. There's never been 3 months where we've put more people to work, over 9 million people. And again, we're just about ready to break the all-time stock market record. I mean, you look at it, we're just about ready to do it again. And what that means is everything else is going to follow.
Delegates who formally nominated Trump as the Republican presidential candidate say they trust him to grow the American economy.
Before the pandemic hit, the economy was incredibly strong. We had record unemployment. We had, the stock market was making records every day. Across the board, the economy is really strong. And this pandemic is only temporary. It's going to end eventually, and businesses are going to restart. So the question is, who has the experience to rebuild the economy?
He owns like 15 hotels.
Even delegates unable to attend the convention because of social distancing protocols say they don't blame the president for the current state of unemployment.
I don't think people are necessarily blaming the president more than just the shutdown and the nature of COVID.
Some business owners in the hospitality industry in Charlotte, North Carolina, who were depending on the increased revenue from the Republican National Convention, say they still have faith in President Trump's ability to revive the economy.
The economy's doing pretty decent, if you look at it. I mean, with what it has to play with, I think we're in a good place right now from an economic perspective. I love the economic policies that President Trump has. I think President Trump, if he would tweet less, and which I think he's done a fantastic job over the last month and a half.
But workers at hotels, restaurants, and cafes have been hit hardest by the pandemic, with the hospitality industry reporting that more than 1/4 of workers in the industry are unemployed. That accounts for about 1/3 of all job losses in the U.S. economy.
Well, I think the only way I personally feel that we can get the economy back is to shut down the pandemic. So we have to, I think as a nation, decide that we have to do that first.
President Trump will continue to make his case to the American people as the convention continues virtually throughout the week. Isha Sarai, VOA News, Charlotte, North Carolina.
A Somali-American has been named Minnesota's Teacher of the Year for 2020. Kolsho Hassan is the first Somali-American to receive the honor, which was announced earlier this month by a group called Education Minnesota. VOA's Maxamoud Mascade has more in this report, narrated by Carol Ginsberg.
30-year-old Kolsho Hassan was surprised and thrilled when she was named Minnesota's Teacher of the Year in early August. It was a first for the state's Somali-Americans.
I felt a lot of different emotions, happiness. I felt relieved. I also felt a lot of excitement, not just for myself, but for my family, my students, my school community, and the Somali community as well.
Hassan was chosen from among more than 130 nominees. She is credited with forging strong connections with her fifth-grade students at the Gideon Pond Elementary School in the Minneapolis suburb of Burnsville.
You have to make sure that the child is social and emotionally ready to learn, and if they aren't, that makes it challenging for them to understand the content and connect with their teacher.
Gideon Pond has roughly 500 students, and more than half come from low-income households. 2/3 are students of color. Hassan says she is focused on giving all youngsters a quality education.
Students of color, in particular Black students, face shortages when it comes to resources and quality education. So I demand, whether I'm at a charter school or a public school, that all students receive quality education and that I give them resources that they need to be successful in the classroom and outside of the classroom as well.
Kolsho Hassan grew up in the Midwestern state of Ohio, where she taught school for 3 years. She also spent a year teaching in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, through the U.S. State Department's Fulbright Fellowship Program. Hassan lost her job at Gideon Park because of budget cuts, but she will be teaching fourth graders this fall at another Burnsville school, Echo Park Elementary.
I love creating an environment where my students feel comfortable, where they feel safe, where they can feel like they can talk to me about their problems, and then feel like they're supported in every way.
Hassan will represent Minnesota in the National Teacher of the Year contest. The winner will be announced next year. Meanwhile, she plans to use her new recognition to push for hiring more teachers of color. For Mohamoud Masade, in Burnsville, Minnesota, Carol Ginsberg, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.